additional discussion with all of you around program design, accreditation, and kindergarten readiness assessments. So hopefully we'll be able to work closely together as we move forward on that. In August, we'll begin the provider approval process. This will be an ongoing process on a rolling basis. In November, we'll have that report back from the Summer Study Commission. And we'll also have selected the evaluator for the required longitudinal study by that time. Then in December of 2014, we anticipate that the accountability system will be finalized. Had a lot of questions about how the 5 counties are being selected, and that is a critical decision to the success of this pre-K grant. As I said, we convened the advisory group in May. This advisory group consisted of early learning experts, as well as members of higher education, Indiana Department of Education, the Chamber of Commerce, business representatives, and researchers representing higher education. We developed a 2-part selection process. In the first part, we looked at all 92 counties, and we measured the data that we had available around the capacity of that county to successfully implement. And we looked specifically at the number of low-income, unserved children. And when I say unserved, I mean those who aren't already enrolled in a Title I funded preschool, Head Start, or other level 3 or 4 paths to quality provider. And then we also looked at the capacity of what we know to be currently eligible programs within that county. And we were looking for certain thresholds. We have to be able to have significant enough students served so that we can implement that longitudinal study. We're going to need a sample size and a control group, and we know the number of children served, in addition to serving more children, which is our ultimate goal, that we do need to meet that longitudinal study requirements. So with those 2 factors in place, we narrowed the 92 counties down to 18 counties, representing areas all across the state, representing both urban and rural. And we have a statement that we'll be releasing that lists those 18 counties. I won't take your time right now to do that. So this takes us into the stage 2 of the 5 county selection process. In this stage, the 18 counties that have been selected as potential candidates to fulfill the needs of the pilot will have the opportunity to submit to FSSA a statement of county readiness, in which we can capture those things that we can't easily capture through the data that we have. What is that county's past commitment to early education? How do they anticipate that they will engage communities, fundraise, engage families, and recruit families to participate? So they'll have the opportunity to submit those statements to us by June 30th. We will then use those statements along with the data that we have and make a selection of the 5 counties. There'll be a review team that does that. That will not be just FSSA on our own. So we are anticipating the full launch of our pre-K grant program in July of 2015. July to enable programs that would like to do an intensive summer readiness program before the start of school, that they will be able to participate in that. The Act, the House Enrolled Act 1004, as introduced, included a planning year with the launch in fall of 2015. And I believe there's the administration's testimony certainly is consistent with that and shows that that was the plan for us to implement. Again, our focus is on a quality program and quality implementation. The pilots will again be able to build on the early education matching grants and that capacity building work that we will be doing next year, because again, those funds will be available to the program so that they can serve more families in the fall of this year. We certainly have a sense of urgency to serve more children. We know that we have unserved children who want, their families want for them a high quality pre-K learning experience, and we want to do that as quickly as we possibly can. But we know we must balance that to make sure that we're meeting the needs that the statute defines that we need to do, but that we're meeting the needs of the families and the early learning providers that choose to participate. The governor has challenged FSSA, and we'll be extending that challenge to the 5 pilot counties to be prepared for an early release in January of 2015. It'll be up to the counties to show that they are prepared for that, they're in compliance with all the statutory requirements, and that they can successfully do that. And that'll actually be part of the statement that they present to FSSA by June 30th. If we don't have any counties that are ready for that early launch, we'll continue on with the planned July of 2015 launch. So just some more information around the timeline drivers, how we got to this point. We know that there are many programmatic elements yet to be determined, and we are working hard on that in conjunction with our advisory group and with the ELAC work groups, and in the future, the Summer Study Commission. We have begun work on the FSSA infrastructure changes, but until we have the details of the pilot counties and the kind of data that we'll need to be capturing, I can't yet complete those IT changes, but we are working on them, and we'll be prepared for the full rollout. We want to focus in on capacity building for programs, either programs that aren't currently offering pre-K as of yet, or those programs that want to advance their rating level to a level 3 or 4. We're hard at work at some additional support to get providers to that point if they choose to participate. We'll be working on identifying those eligible children and their families, and then also ensuring that there are enough children for the study, the longitudinal study, and making sure that we have that evaluator in place to get high-quality baseline data. So at the conclusion of the pilot year, we will really have a comparison data that we can work with. So maybe before I turn, Claire, do you want to do the next section? So Claire has agreed to present to you the next section on your role in this pre-K grant program.
And so since we're switching speakers here, any comments on the presentation, the preschool piece that you've heard about? I have, and before I take your comments, I want to say that I think there's going to be a challenge that I would like you to make sure is on your radar all the time, and that will be the challenge of mobility of the population that you're actually serving. When you give out the money to the families, to the families, and then they choose the daycare, they choose the pre-K, then they may move. And they may move into, what happens with the mobility and the switching of the facilities and this. I'm just putting it out there as a pretty large challenge for the population that you're trying to serve, is the actual mobility of the families themselves. And the ability to finish out at a pre-K that they may have received dollars to attend.
That's absolutely a challenge, and one of the benefits I think I bring to the table is we work with low-income families every day,
Sure.
and that has been a long-term challenge for us, and I think we've found some ways to deal with that and to support families and programs in that.
Except now they're part of a longitudinal study.
And the study design will have to be oversampled, so that when we know that that happens and we're not able to successfully keep track of those children over time, that there's enough of an oversampling that we still have a successful longitudinal study.
Okay, I just
It's
put
a
it out there
challenge.
because it's a really huge challenge, and with 23% poverty of our kids in the state of Indiana now, it's becoming like the challenge almost, even within our school districts, going from school to school and district to district and having continuity in what they're doing. So I just put that out there, that it might be very difficult to find a sample of kids in the population we're serving that's actually going to be able to be, continued part of your sample. So,
Yeah, I
Tony?
appreciate that. Thank you.
How are you determining who to interface with at the county level?
And that's an excellent question, and something that we've been debating back and forth, making sure that counties have the opportunity to come together and to collaborate, because that's really what this is about. It's not about one program in a county, but it's about a county-level collaboration. We're going to be releasing this today, the 18 counties, the Statement of County Readiness. Part of that process is a webinar that'll be held next week. And during that webinar, we're going to talk about how can you collaborate, who should be at the table, but it's really up to the county to decide who that's going to be. We know there's a lot of really great work being done at the county level and organizations that have been taking the lead on that, so we'll be working with them.
Because that could drastically affect the quality of the product that's submitted. Are the counties embargoed, or can you say?
We can say.
Is Lake in there?
Lake is in there.
All Right.
Again, based
We
on...
really need
You're
it
in the
bad.
18.
We really need it bad, but it's really important we have the right people working on the proposal, that you're talking to the right people. But I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. And I don't have the list on me, and I would hate to go from memory, but I can tell you the 18 counties.
Brad?
That's what I wanted to know.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to know the 18.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us any of them other
Oh,
than Lake?
Is that being
How about
announced
this?
today?
Yes, it is. And so
Okay,
when
so that's
Claire
being
is
announced
presenting
today.
to you the
You'll
next
find out.
section, I'll go back and get my list, which is
Yeah,
just in the
you'll
back of the
find out.
room, and I can tell you those
Thank
18.
you.
Certainly.
And I don't know that we need to be the announcement here at our public meeting. You're getting ready to release something?
There'll be a press release at noon, I believe.
Okay. And yeah, we can get
Certainly.
it after that.
Yeah, I'll make sure you
We
get
don't
them.
need to preempt.
I'd like to know right now.
You really want to know?
Oh,
All right,
come
I'll talk to you back
on.
there in a little bit. Before I turn it over
Brad?
to Claire, is there any more questions for FSSA?
Yeah, any more, Brad? I think you had a
Just a quick
question.
request. When you send that out, can we please have an electronic copy of this as well, along with the timeline? That would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Well, they'll be posted on the FSSA website as well for those other folks who might want to see it.
Okay. Claire?
Great. Well, I just have a very brief update on the role of the State Board of Education, which is named in the pre-K pilot statute. So we have 3 distinct roles. The first is that FSSA is going to come back to you at your July 9th board meeting to explain the fleshed out program design parameters, and at that time the 5 counties may have been selected. I don't want to preempt because Melanie said end of July, although we'll try for earlier July. So that is supposed to be presented to you for review and comment, not for approval. At the September meeting, the plan right now is to bring the proposed kindergarten readiness assessment, which has to be approved by the State Board of Education, and that is just for the pilot. So I want to make sure I clarify that. And then also in November, FSSA is supposed to consult with the State Board of Education board before selecting and entering into a contract with an evaluator to conduct the longitudinal study. So those are the 3 roles of the State Board of Education. As Melanie mentioned earlier, she will be back here frequently, and hope that the State Board of Ed is an active partner as this pilot is finalized and rolled out.
Thank you. Any comments? Thank you very much. Thanks, Melanie. The April 1 special education count, child count was given to you for informational purposes. If you've got any questions at this time. Seeing none. The update on the pass rates and cut scores of CASA exams. Recent, I believe we have a Pearson representative with us today. Oh, so sorry, I did forget. I mean, I skipped over by accident the strategic planning update. So sorry. Let's go to strategic planning.
Superintendent Ritz, members of the board, good morning. I was kind of hoping I would slide by and not have to do this. You'd just forget me. I'm Rick Rozelle with the Silk Corporation. I believe this is the second time.
If you don't mind, I want to see who's still on the phone.
Sure.
So if I need to wait for comments. So is David, are you still on the phone?
I'm on the phone. Where are we at in the agenda? I can't hear.
Okay, so Dan, you're still there. Is David Freitas still on the phone? Okay, so
Come in a while. The only person I can hear clearly is.
okay, so Dan, I think you're the only one on the phone, and so we'll try and speak as loudly as we can in the microphone. We are on strategic. We're on strategic planning.
David, are you there?
Strategic planning?
Yes, strategic planning.
David, are you there?
No.
No.
Dan Elsner's here. I did not hear David.
Okay, thank you.
Are we on strategic planning?
We are, and we're going to try and speak.
Hello. Hello, it's David. Yes, I'm on. I had my phone on mute and so I forgot to take it off, but I am here.
All right, and perhaps, if you don't mind, maybe you want to go and give your presentation.
By the
Does
phone.
the board mind? Why don't you do your presentation right over there in that chair, right by that microphone, and then that will be good. I think they'll both be able to hear. Everyone received a copy?
Yes, everyone should have a copy of the balanced scorecard,
Correct.
which is the essence of your strategic plan that we're preparing for you. This is the second update. Chris Craig and Harvey Perkins came before you earlier this year, I believe, to give you an update. And what I'd like to do today, we're getting close to having basically version 1.0 of the balanced scorecard, or your strategic plan. What I'd like to do today is just to give you an update on the process, give you an opportunity to suggest some additional changes to this before we finalize this in the July session. I want to emphasize that the balanced scorecard, this instrument, is a product of the process, but it is the process that's important. And what you do with this instrument following the creation of version 1.0 is makes or breaks the value of this thing. This instrument, the document itself, is not worth the paper it's written on if it's not followed up on and the things in here aren't actually done. So I want to emphasize the process. What I want to do today is walk you through how we got to here, what the process was to get to here, what's been done, touch very briefly on a couple of the highlights in the balanced scorecard, give you an opportunity to suggest some additions to it if you have them here today, and you can take some time later in the week after this session to provide those back to us. Then we'll talk about the next steps to finalize this instrument before your July meeting, and then we'll talk about the process to follow from that point forward to operationalize it. So to get to here, we followed a process, and our role is, SELT's role, is to walk you through a process to create an instrument that begins the operationalizing of the balanced scorecard. What we've done so far, we worked with the planning committee to develop the mission and vision, and then we worked with them to develop goals and objectives. And then we brought those to you and presented those to you in a work session. You all provided some additional input to the process with some objectives. You helped refine the goals. We worked then with the planning committee to begin to develop high-level strategies. Now, strategies, just as a reminder, are those things that are your goals and objectives define what you want to accomplish. The strategies articulate how. So the strategies become very important to such an instrument because they define the work going forward that you want to pursue. Once we had the goals established, we began to establish goal teams around each of the three goals to come in and talk in more detail about what those strategies are for each of the goals. We had work sessions with the goal teams. One was face-to-face, one was by conference call. We aggregated and distilled the goal team work into a version of the balanced scorecard, brought that before the planning committee a couple of weeks ago. Took their feedback, and this is the instrument that we have. So this instrument takes into consideration the work that was done by the planning committee, the work that was done by you all. I omitted a step. We did take this to the stakeholders, a group of stakeholders, to gather feedback, which we factored into the process and gave that feedback back to the planning committee. It encompasses work of the goal teams, and we also threw some ideas in here for you all to consider. So all of that input is in this instrument now. You all have the opportunity today to provide some feedback of things that you may see missing or that you want to change. Some highlights in the balanced scorecard. A lot of the work is focusing on the basic blocking and tackling work that you've got to do around standards and assessment and the waiver. Some of that, you might argue, is not necessarily strategic, but much of it is. So that forms a lot of the work that's in here. The instrument does build on some of the measures that you have been using historically as a state, like school grades and iRead 3 and teacher and principal evaluations. Those are fine metrics to continue to use. You do have some longer range strategies around data and technology. I think that are a little further horizon out there. That's some challenging strategies and some objectives. The stakeholder engagement strategies in Goal 3 reflect response to what you've heard from your stakeholder groups, which I think are very important. So I don't want to walk through this instrument line by line. I did not come here today to do that. You have had copies of it. And what I'd like to do is, if you have any questions about it, if you see any big gaps in this, now's your opportunity to say so. We'll take your input and we'll create actually a final document which is a little friendlier than this version. This is our working instrument. We'll actually wrap around verbiage to make it a much more readable document, combine the strategies under the goals, and make it flow like a typical strategic plan.
So,
Rick, this is Dan Ellsbury, and I wanted to thank the committee for their work and Rick for the work itself and everybody from the board staff and others that participated. It does give us three clear directions that we want to constantly measure that are essential, starting with student learning, including data, so we know focuses on the key thing that we, that hopefully we can control and influence, and that's the quality of the professionals we put with our young people. And finally, engaging the entire community around the effort and building a culture of learning in our state. The other thing that people should realize is that as this plan gets finalized, the governor, frankly, has put out a strong vision that this is a unified process, not segmented. In other words, there's K-12 education, where we spend billions of dollars. We also spend a lot of money on higher education, and then another additional many millions on workforce development. And at some point, there has to be a synthesis, right and left hand and mind and body politic all working together to see that the future of the economic, social, and cultural quality of life in Indiana will be tied to our ability to bring these plans and clarity on their own and in synthesis to public policy, local boards, superintendents, dedicated educators, parents, etc. So we move forward. So there's a larger vision here, probably than has ever been articulated, and this will be obviously a critical piece. But it does focus on student learning outcomes, the human resource we put to that at K-12 level, and engaging all levels of the community. As Rick said, that was a large part of the input received from stakeholders. So thanks to the committee. We have a pretty clear direction, and Rick said we'll take any input so we get the final product together by July.
so I think we have before us, there was an updated one sent out to you with actual data indicated in the scorecard. And so we'll start with those pages, and you may or may not have the data. And I'd like to say right at the start that we may need to work with the Department of Education on some of this data. Some of it's aggregated according to accountability ways which we calculate. Others are calculated in another manner to actually report out. So we just want to be in congruence with that. And the information, when you do look at it, I want to bring to your attention that the IREAD 3, the 86.3% that is on here is not the summer data. So kids are retaking those, and we always report out the summer data as the final. So what you have here is not accurate. So we will give that percentage out. We'll be reporting that out. But the baseline for 2012-13 is accurate as 91.4% after the summer piece. So I just wanted to update you on that. In having looked at this, the only comment that I would make is that the last one, F, measure of character and citizenship, determining how we might want to actually measure that, those are very, very important issues, but there are also things that should be addressed within school improvement plans at the local level, and I don't know that it's a state function to actually, because I see later on that, we're going to make some decisions and adopt Indiana character standards for students at all grade levels, and I don't want to, I just want to say from my personal point of opinion that that's a really local issue that usually is determined at the local level with school board input, deciding their character values for their corporation or their schools, making sure everybody's aware of that, and for the state to put its out. I'm just saying that I think that's a really hard one to measure, and I think it's a really local kind of piece that perhaps the State Board of Education may not want to engage in. Any other comments on that topic? Agreement, disagreement? Because they're going to go forward and change this. Yeah, Andrea?
Do we vote? Is there a vote that will be
Uh,
taken at some point on this document?
Not now.
Not today.
No.
This is just discussion. We're just giving input.
This is your opportunity to do what
Correct.
the superintendent's doing, to say, you know, I'd like for you to modify this, or I
Yeah.
think you missed that. And recognize we run the process. We shy away from actually giving you content to this instrument. This should be your ideas, and we'll nudge you in directions sometimes if we think
Is-
you're missing something.
So
but-
what I'm speaking about is in the scorecard.
No, I understand, yeah.
Letter F,
Mhm.
measure character and citizenship. It also asks us to measure that between the subgroups, and I just don't know how that's possible. And then 1.8 in the strategies speaks to this board adopting and implementing Indiana character standards for all students in all grade levels. So I'm just stating that I feel that that's a local decision, and we should encourage that as part of their school improvement process.
Sure.
But to actually have the state engage in that might be something that we can't accomplish. Brad?
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing at this point. I just wouldn't want to remove it at this point. I guess the thing I think, but too, is there's a number of states and there's a number of research models out there where, and I agree, I don't think you want to dictate ever to a local body how they teach anything. We've tried to retain local control. I'm a big believer in that. But I do think that it is possible for us, as we just explore this, there are some models out there where we can find, I think, some consensus around some general constructs of citizenship. And since in our mission we're saying that we want them to be civic-minded or civic-minded individuals, I think that metric is reflective of the mission from that standpoint. But I do agree. I think they'd have to be very general, very broad, and it'd have to be some way that you could collect it. But I would encourage us to take a look. There are models out there that are worth studying, and I don't think we are at a point we can decide on it today. But
Right.
And there are things, and I Brad, to that point, we could reword that one to really talk about, investigate other states and models and, see what they're doing. But I'm not sure we should put it in our scorecard as an actual measure. I'm not sure so we have many that have our little local measures that we're putting, our measures for each strategy. I'm not sure it should be in the overall scorecard.
yeah, I guess my understanding of a scorecard, though, is if you don't measure it, you lose intentionality around it. And I think the discussion when we put it in here as a placeholder is that we didn't want to lose that aspect of our mission. Now, I'm not trying to speak for the entire subcommittee. We're all on that subcommittee, but that's the debate we need to have. I think it's worth keeping in there from the standpoint of, if you're strictly looking at academics, I think you're missing a big piece of the puzzle, because you really need to understand whether or not we are, in fact, passing along the attributes that they need. Because college and career readiness, in my mind, isn't just all academics. It's a combination of academics, but also your character. It's, can you be responsible? Can you be organized? Can you think in a way? Can you act in a way that makes you in a position, or puts you in a position to be able to move forward? So I'm not agreeing or disagreeing at this point, but I wouldn't want to see us remove that. I would like to see us study it further, see if we can identify a metric, because there are other places that are looking at that. But I do agree with the superintendent. That has to be locally driven, how they actually teach it for mastery.
Sure.
All we would be doing is trying to gauge it and measure it.
So let us work on a way to put those comments together so that we allow the local flexibility. We leave it present, but with stressing to come up with some frameworks that would be recommended to districts, and perhaps even leveraging the school improvement planning process and as part of that. Keep it as a strategy.
And if I could, along the same lines, in that third area, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, I think we could use your input on those as well, because those are other ones that can be very hard to measure. The superintendent's saying, when you start talking about family attitudes towards schools,
Right.
Trying to find a valid and reliable instrument to do that can be
Yes.
extremely challenging. So if there are ideas on that, but it can be done. It is being done. There are some instruments that I'm thinking about, but that needs to be vetted properly.
So let's talk about the strategies. Any more comments on the actual scorecard as presented? Andrea?
I just had a couple questions on the teacher effectiveness indicators, but the attempt to tie effectiveness to factors. I noticed
Are you in the strategies or
Oh.
the very first part on the scorecard?
Strategies for goal 2.
All right,
Am I in the
so
wrong
we're going to
place?
go through them one by one, if
Oh,
that's
sorry.
okay. So let's take the first section for goal 1. So strategies for goal 1. So are there, I already made a comment about the adoption and implementation of Indiana character standards for all students at all grade levels, thinking that that should be reworded and then 1.12, I would make a comment that I'm not sure that the leading indicators are appropriate. You're asking the State Board of Education to provide a detailed plan of the process and schedule for communicating and delivering supports for educators to the new state assessments. Yeah?
Hello?
Hello? Yes? Is that David?
This is David. Can you hear me?
Yeah?
we hear you, Dave.
I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out. I wanted to return to the character education, if that's appropriate.
You may.
The intent of the character education part was to provide direction from the State Board of Education, and it was no way to limit or inhibit local control of that. And so the intent was to set some broad standards, to provide direction, to provide guidance to local school districts on the character education component. As I listen to some of my higher education colleagues and CEOs and businesses, they keep talking about the importance of employees and students going into the university having some character traits such as responsibility, civility, persistence, and so forth. And so based on those comments, I see a great divide in what we're currently doing and what we're proposing to do in this strategic plan. And so as I look at the strategic plan, we should be aspirational. And so I see the character education component as, again, some broad guidelines to local school districts. So I would respectfully ask that that not be changed at this point in time. And if we need further discussion on it, that's fine. But to change it at this point, I think would be a mistake.
Oh, I'm not asking.
David, this is Dan Elson. I want to piggyback on that. You know, this is about leadership. We know that the local level, it's about implementation. This is to put aggressively aspirational vision out there for education. And our state needs it. It needs it on reading, it needs it on character, it needs it on performance, it needs it on disaggregation of groups to make sure no one left behind. So, you know, local control is something we've embraced for a long time in terms of implementation. But we know watching any organization, any state, any country goes where it has strong leadership. It puts out a goal and aspiration that will change people's lives and the collective future we have together as a state. So while we can talk about there are complications how you measure and different roles for different levels, this is a State Board of Education working with a governor who has strong aspirations about education and workforce training, etc., putting out very strong goals. Sure, they'll be difficult to measure, and there'll be many innovative strategies to get there, and many innovative implementations at the local level. But we don't want to walk away from putting out an aspiration. That's the role of leader. That's the role of the board.
And so if I hear you, and so I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what I said. I'm not against character education in any way. I just feel that if the board adopts and implements Indiana academic standards for all students in all grade levels, that is the state telling the locals how it is that they should do it. But I've heard you both say, talking about guidelines, and I don't mind any of that. I think we should take the lead on things like that. I'm just questioning the actual wording of what we have here in this strategy, because once we formally adopt and then it says to implement them, then I am requiring the locals to actually do what the state has said. And so I'm just asking that we possibly look at the wording of what's here, and so I'm all about making sure that we do have character development going on in our schools. Are there any other items under Goal 1? I started out to say that under 1.12, that I'm not sure we have good leading indicators there. So we could take a look at that, because the local assessments I don't think will be good leading indicators for having that done. Anything else on Goal 1? Goal 2. I think you had comments, Andrea, on Goal 2.
Well, it was more a question on the data that are the factors that they're going to try and connect.
Correct.
Okay. So when we look at degrees, does that differentiate between degrees in content area versus degrees in education?
It was.
So you're talking about the leading indicators on Goal 2 for 2.11, I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, where I've seen these used, and we actually stole some of this language from other scorecards from other places. The focus was just on advanced degrees. It wasn't necessarily within a particular subject, but most of them are looking at education degrees.
I think it would be extremely helpful, particularly looking at teacher effectiveness, whether undergraduate degrees or advanced degrees, to be able to break it down between content degrees versus ed degrees.
And we do have this type of information. I checked this with RISA. So the leading indicators in Goal 2.11 we can do. However, I would caution that the wording in the 2.11 where it says "and diversity," we do not collect diversity information of the teachers. So in other words, by race and ethnicity. So perhaps if diversity is actually meaning that, then we have no data to collect for that. I don't see them as indicators over here, leading indicators, so perhaps just the word diversity and what it means in 2.11 might be clarified. Or maybe it's not needed, I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe it's not needed.
Yeah,
actually.
it may not be needed there, because it doesn't really say in leading indicators to do that. We are going to report out retention rates, and I don't know that that's on here. We are going to report out retention rates per HEA 1388. We're required to start collecting that data, so that might be a leading indicator that you can add to it. Troy?
In this, on Goal 2, it talks about recruitment and retaining staff. Is there any data being collected on the compensation models and whether that information is included in that?
You mean within the state compensation models?
Are you
that
talking
the
about having
various
an
districts are
impact,
using?
or?
Well, I think it does. It will have an impact eventually.
And are you talking about tying compensation to teacher performance, or what, just the model in general?
No,
or?
just how the retention, was it based upon?
Are the compensation models having an impact on retention of teachers?
I see, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we're, I know across the state, as Brad said earlier today, we have a great number of veteran staff that are choosing to retire at this time, and so there's going to be a lot of, I would say, a great deal of change in our teaching force this year. So I think the retention piece and maybe that compensation models that have been changing over the past several years, we may need to look at that as, is that an impact?
I will
Good
check
point.
with the department and see if there's some kind of correlation information that we might be able to do. I'll check.
That may need a study, actually, to categorize the various compensation
Yeah.
models and then collect
It
the
might
data on
actually be a
them and then
research study.
correlate that to teacher retention. But it's a great thought that we should include. Yeah.
Any other, Andrea?
I apologize if you already answered that. What does that mean, teacher and principal, this is on 2.13, teacher and principal ratings correlated to universities?
We are required, we will be doing a correlation between the teacher and principal ratings and correlating that to the universities in years 1, 2, and 3 of a teacher's tenure. So we are collecting that data. We're required to collect that data by law. So we actually are looking at the universities in which they attended, and their ratings will be tied to the university. And you might clarify that with years 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I took that note.
Okay. Goal 3, Do we have comments, suggestions on goal 3? I have a couple. I'll start it off. One's just a grammatical. 3.11 should have an A instead of an an.
I've corrected that about twice, and it keeps creeping back in.
It doesn't
here.
work, huh?
I don't know what.
And then the 3.13, we certainly, the leading indicators we collect at the Department of Education all the time, but I'm not quite sure in the actual goal. It says state monies will follow the child to the school selected by the parent. Like, that's by law. I mean, that happens. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure
It doesn't need to
why
be in
it's there.
Yeah, okay.
I guess.
That sentence can be struck.
And then 3.16, I just want to be sure we have enough leeway with the Parents Academy to involve technology. If we're talking about actually people coming together to an academy meeting or something like that, that might be really something that can't be handled at a state level necessarily, when we could bring some parent groups together. But we certainly could involve technology and provide resources and work with PTA. I mean, we certainly could get partnerships and do some things with that to get some things going.
Okay.
I just want to be sure it's broad enough to allow for that and what it looks like. And those were my only comments.
Superintendent Ritz, if you would just expound just a moment, a little bit more on what you mean by engaging technology in that one.
Well, being able to run that parent academy through a technology format.
Online, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Understand. Very good.
Other comments? I believe is the next step to take this before the stakeholders that you convened the first time?
That's correct. That's what I'm going to go over next is where do we go from here to take this to the more final product. As you said, we'll be working on the baseline values, and what you have right now is just a very, very initial first cut for the measures where that data is available. Now, not all measures have that data, but where it's available, we'll be putting those into the instrument, suggesting some targets, so that you want to suggest targets for the out years, and your strategies are intended to help you meet those targets. So that's how this instrument works. We'll identify projects that we recommend that you launch to put these strategies into effect. For example, we just talked about the Parent Academy. That would require a project to launch that and get that going. So we'll give you a list of, based on the strategies that you've articulated, here are the 10 or 15 projects that we recommend. We'll put them in some sequence for you that makes sense to us, knowing what we know, but we'll bring it to you to prioritize. We'll give you a sample project plan for how you would launch a project. We'll actually do that for one of the projects that we identify. We'll take this instrument and wrap around it, make it into a document that flows. So it describes what the balanced scorecard process is, and describes the visions and the mission and the strategies aligned to goals and those kinds of things. So it flows so that the average person can read it and make good sense of it. And I know that this instrument, this spreadsheet is not something that the average person is going to be relate to very well. So we'll create that next. That comes to you for approval in July. There will be an update to the stakeholder group. I think Claire's team is doing that next week to get their feedback, to begin actually some of the strategies in Goal 3. And then we give it to you to approve in July. And that's version 1.0 of this thing, which we hope you will continue to refine as you go through the process. Now let me talk about how you operationalize this process. What we'd like to see is that you take what we give you, you prioritize the projects. We'll give you what makes sense logically in terms of sequence, but maybe there are some pressing issues in the state and you want to push some projects further up the list. You prioritize your list. You can either use this body itself to oversee those projects, or you can extend the work of the planning committee, or you can create another oversight committee for this instrument that would assign project managers, a project manager to each project, assign sponsors to each project, Make sure that they bring to you a project plan that is actionable, that lays out here's what they're going to do, the milestones and deliverables and dates. Fund that project, give them money to do it. Don't send anybody off to do something that you don't give them money to do. Have each project then, once you've done all that work, begin their work. Invite them back periodically, every 6 weeks, to check on their progress. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're ensuring that they actually do the work that you've outlined in the strategy, and that they're keeping in sync with your vision of what you intended the outcomes to be. And if you do that with every project, what you begin to realize is that this becomes a living document, not a static document. You're going to realize that some things in here aren't right. As I'll tell you right now, there are some things in here that aren't right. We haven't worked with anybody yet that got it completely right the first time. You'll adjust it. You'll adjust some of your measures because the measures aren't telling you what you want to know. You'll adjust some of your strategies because you realize maybe that one wasn't such a bright idea. And you'll iterate through this month after month, year after year, your launch projects, and you'll begin to realize that you are achieving what the intent that was articulated in your balanced scorecard. So that's the process that we recommend to operationalize the strategies and make sure that you continually launch projects in sequence, fund them, and just monitor their progress. So that's our recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. We're going to take one more item before lunch. Lunch has arrived, but we have a guest here for the next item. So update on pass rates and cut scores on CASA exams. I believe that you have, if you could, pull up or make sure that you have in front of you the Indiana cut score document. We are not taking action today. We want to present you with all of your options, have robust dialogue, and then vote at our next meeting. Why don't you, if you don't mind, can you present from over here? Thank you.
As most of you may remember, last summer we came to you with about 60 new licensure content and pedagogy exams and cut scores. And in the course of your discussions over a couple of months, getting ready to take action on those, you expressed an interest in us bringing back to you pass rate information on tests once they have been operational for a year. And so we're bringing you pass rates on the CASA Basic Skills Test, which has been in effect almost a year, since last July 1st. And the cut scores for the CASA tests were set in December of 2012 by the State Board of Education. And by rule and statutes, tests cannot become operational until 6 months after you've approved them. So they became operational in July. So what we have today for you is an explanation of the pass rates on the CASA Basic Skills Test, which includes 3 subtests, reading, writing, and math. And we have representatives from Pearson here to talk about the data. They prepared this information. We have Barbara Apple and Nancy Hahn from Pearson, who can answer some questions and make a brief presentation to you about this statistical analysis. And then we thought you may want to have a discussion about the ramifications of the pass rates, what options you might have, and think about what you want to do going forward with action at a future meeting.
And,
So-
basically, we have 2 decisions to make. Whether we want to do what we call a compensatory model of adding the scores, or a non-compensatory model of adding the scores, and those are 2 different things, and deciding if we want to take the panel-based passing score or continue with, or make another determination to actually stay with the +1. So we are giving you actual data, And so if we could have the Pearson presentation, that would be wonderful to walk us through this briefly. I think most of you have been through the cut score information. I see a lot of head nodding. So if you would go ahead, and why don't you switch places, please? Thank you. You can just sit beside her, Risa, and if you need to speak, we'll move the microphone to you. Yeah, just have a seat.
Okay.
And go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Right. I'm Nancy Hahn. This is Barbara Apple. We're happy to be with you today. And everybody does have this memo and document, because really what we're going to do today is give you just a little bit of background about CASA, and then walk you through the data, answer any questions you might have about the data, and then answer questions you might have as you consider your options for moving forward. So CASA is the Core Academic Skills Assessment. It's a requirement for entry into educator preparation programs in the state. It is not the only requirement, as your memo has indicated. CASA includes 3 subtests. There's a reading subtest, and the reading subtest is passage-based. It's all multiple choice items. Candidates read passages that are really geared at the entry-level college content, and they respond to a series of questions about the passage. The mathematics subtest is all multiple choice based, and in terms of the kinds of level and content it includes, it goes up through Algebra 1. It also does include some basic geometry and basic statistics and probability. Then there's the writing subtest. The writing subtest includes both multiple choice questions and 1 constructed response assignment. The multiple choice section of CASA is weighted 60%. The writing assignment is weighted 40%. In the writing assignment, candidates are given 2 passages of texts that present differing viewpoints on an educational issue, and they're charged with writing a response in which they take a position and defending that position. CASA is based on Indiana standards and Indiana academic standards, and we've also been looking at CASA again to make sure that it has remained aligned with the college and career readiness standards that have just been approved. We're finalizing that, but we're happy to say that it continues to be aligned with those new standards.
Dan Elsener
has left the conference.
A little bit about the standard setting process. We used an industry accepted standard setting process that was very similar to what we presented to this board last July when you made your determination of passing scores for the licensure tests. The standard setting panel included Indiana teachers and teacher educators from approved educator preparation programs. They met for 1 day in which they made recommendations for each of the subtests. The standard setting process involves a lot of training, and it begins with the panel taking the test. The reason you do that is that it gives the panel members an understanding of the knowledge and skills included on the assessment. In a sense, it helps people understand the level of rigor of the assessment. Following taking the test, there's additional training in the knowledge and skills needed for this test. The training involved the knowledge and skills needed to be effective in an Indiana educator preparation program, and involved a lot of discussion about what level of knowledge and skills were required in the areas of reading, writing, and mathematics. Panel members then provided 2 rounds of standard setting ratings, and then at the conclusion of that, we prepared a report for the department that highlighted the process. It provided them with the panel recommended passing scores, and then also standard error measurement adjustments to those passing scores. As Risa indicated, in December of 2012, the state board made a decision to set the passing standard higher than the panel recommended level. We implemented that standard when the test became operational in July of last year. So, any questions so far about the process?
Nope. Go
Nope?
right
Okay.
into the data.
All right. So if you could take a look at the data in front of you. The first page, I do need to ask, is your do you have it in color or just black and white? Color? Okay. All right. Black and white. Okay. A little bit of both.
That's not
Okay. So the box on the top provides information about each of the individual subtests. We provide the number of candidates who have tested, the test length, which are the scorable number of items on the test, and then reading across, in those boxes are the percentage of candidates who would pass at panel-based recommended scores as well as standard error of measurement adjustments to those scores. All of this data, I want to let you know, is based on the first time a candidate takes a test, because that's the most appropriate way in determining a passing standard for an assessment.
So if you want to mark your paper or make sure we're really looking at two categories.
Right.
We're looking at the panel-based passing score, and we're looking at the +1. Those are the two that we're really going to be focusing on.
Yes, okay. And we report the data separately for each test in that top chart there. The bottom chart below, to meet the basic skills requirement for entry into preparation programs, candidates have to pass each subtest. And so they don't meet the requirement until they pass the assessment overall. The bottom box highlights of the candidates who take all three assessments the first time, what percentage of those candidates pass. And at the panel-based score +1 SEM is where it's set right now. And then the box to your right would be if the standard had been set at the panel recommended level. If we go, any questions about the data on this page so
So
far?
just to clarify, we had 1,331 students take the test.
Take all three subtests.
Take all three subtests, and with our cut score we currently have now, the +1, 31%, then we're able to enter an education program.
That they pass the assessment the first time.
Okay.
You can retake CASA. You have to wait 30 days in order to retake it, and there's no limit.
Okay.
Can you
Yes,
just
Carrie?
retake the subtest?
Yes.
Yes.
You just
No. So whatever you pass,
right.
you just take that test.
You just retake that portion, that subtest you don't pass.
Are there, as there are for SATs, are there CASA prep classes or CASA prep materials?
That's a great question. Right now, there's a free study guide that's on the program website. There is also a CASA practice test that is online that candidates can purchase. There is also a mobile app that has about 60 multiple choice questions only that candidates can purchase. So any questions about this first page? All right. Now, if we turn the page, because one of the things Superintendent Ritz indicated is one of the decisions you're going to have to make is whether CASA should, right now it is a non-compensatory model, which means the candidates have to pass each of the subtests in order to meet the requirement. There's another model that you could choose to adopt in which candidates would have to achieve a passing score across all three subtests. That's called a fully compensatory model. And in that model, in essence, you could not meet the passing standard, which is set at 220 for a subtest, but still pass the assessment overall if you met the 660 passing score. Okay? So on this second page, the top boxes are what the pass rate would be if you maintain a non-compensatory model. And then on the bottom, that shows you what the pass rates would be if you chose to move to a fully compensatory model.
So does the fully compensatory model, is that mostly going to address students who don't pass the math?
No.
No?
Did I answer that correctly, perhaps?
It will certainly
They could
It will
score. They
help
could
them.
score very well on language arts and maybe still get their 220 and not have the math.
Yeah, so,
That's
so,
correct,
yeah,
Andrea.
so candidates who have a weakness in math, for if that's your concern,
Or weakness.
could pass the assessment if you take a fully compensatory model.
I was just wondering which would be most affected, the weak math or the weak language arts?
Well, the pass rates are higher on the language arts portions.
Yeah, that was on the first page.
Yeah.
I mean, actually quite a bit higher than the mathematics. So it broke it down.
So now,
yeah,
But you will have to do very, very well on the other two subtests.
in order to do that.
Very high scores exceed the cut score significantly in order to compensate for
the
a
math.
lower performance on another subtest.
Brad?
I want to come at the same thing, but I want to come at it differently. Because the jump, the jump between 31% and 56%. Sorry, David, go ahead.
David?
The question is, in that second model that you're talking about, then it would be possible for someone to score, to pass reading and mathematics and completely fail writing, and they would be, get a passing score, is that correct?
that is a possibility, yes.
Right, so that comes back to where I want to.
And why would you be
Not yet.
recommending or proposing an option that a person could, for example, in my scenario, fail writing, that we would let them go into the teaching profession? On what basis does that come from, or what logic?
David, there's no proposal here. The Pearson's simply presenting data to us because we have to make a decision. The board asked for it to come back after a year, and so there's two decisions that we always will look at. One is the compensatory or the non-compensatory, and then also the actual passing the cut rates. So there's no proposal here to anybody to go any direction. We're simply presenting information.
I wanted to come.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
The second model just didn't make logical sense to me, so that explains it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do want to talk about the second model because for years we've had that under praxis. And so a lot of us that have been around for a while, we're familiar with that model. What concerns me, though, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, because when I see those math scores in the first page, and I see them as low as they are, and I see the jump at one standard deviation to the plus, to the good, and I see the jump go from 31 to 56, I have to believe it was math that drove it. I don't know that because I can't see the aggregate data.
Math
but
is
am I,
the driver.
Am I
Yes.
right?
No, you are
math's
right.
the driver?
Yes.
Because that's the only thing I want to make sure, because that's a hefty jump of 20 points there. Actually, it's 25 points, 25 percentage points, which really, for me to see that kind of a jump, that says something to me about that aggregate data, which says that their math performance was pretty low to begin with if they're compensating out of writing and language arts.
Can I ask you to go back to the first page of data that we looked at? Because what I'd like to do is just highlight that for the math, if you go from where the standard is set now, if you choose a non-compensatory model, if that's a decision that this board chooses to make, you do see a jump, and you choose to go with the panel recommended score, you do see a bit of a jump in a pass rate there.
Nancy, can I follow up on that for a second? On that math data, I mean, I guess even just looking at it, and it's just at that subtest, just for a second, I'm assuming Pearson's able to do test item analysis and look at that. Do you feel pretty confident that those questions are valid, reliable, that we literally do have only 44% at the +1 marker
Yeah.
I mean, because
Our-
that should be of concern to us, I think, one. I know
Our
it's a
KR
separate related issue, but if you're telling me the
Right.
test and the item analysis says that data is valid and reliable, I'm concerned.
We do feel comfortable in that.
Okay.
I do want to let you know, it's a short test, it's 32 items.
Okay.
We know that longer tests have greater reliabilities, but our KR20 for the math subtest is about 0.8,
And-
which is very good for that length of a test.
What's that close to, what does that top out at in terms of comparativeness to a high school math? Because I know under Praxis 1, it used to be like 8th grade or 9th grade general math or something like that.
Algebra 1
Algebra
is
1.
what the test developers told me. However, they did say some fairly rigorous content in Algebra 1, but
Okay.
there is not Algebra 2 included.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so on the last page,
Right.
these are our considerations for the next meeting for action. And so we wanted to be sure that everybody was clear about what these options are actually doing. And so I'm going to see if I can explain it to see if I have it right. And then you can jump in. So option 1 is leaving it as we have it now. Okay? So that means they would have to pass all 3 subtests, non-compensatory model, and we would still leave it at the +1. Option 2 keeps the same thing. We want to see all 3 tests passed, but it would be at the panel recommended score, and then you can see the percentage there that would result in. And in my conversation with Pearson and with Risa, all of our other exams are at the panel recommended, okay, except for this one. This one was decided to do a +1. So option 3 then would go to the other model, and you can see what it would be at the +1. And then option 4, the fully compensated model, would then, you can see the percentage that would be at the panel recommended score. So that's really kind of what we'll be deciding next time, and we wanted to be sure everybody understood all of the options and everything and have a little bit of time to think about it. More questions? Everybody get it? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll put it on the agenda next time for action. We are going to take a break for lunch, and we will resume our work at 1 o'clock. Is that all right? Oh, okay, 1 o'clock.
Do you have a ETA for the next part of the agenda, or how long it might take?
Depends upon the conversation with the board, but we've got the resource guide, the waiver update, 10:05, and assessment. I mean,
Like 2 hours?
yeah, at least. I would say at least.
Okay. So,
We're breaking for lunch.